Hi, Mr. Richards here. Today's lesson is on special products. We're going to take polynomials and apply rules of special products such as square of a sum and square of a difference in order to solve and simplify. Now, we have 7z plus 2 and that's squared. Well, what if I had this written out as 7z plus 2 times 7z plus 2. Well, typically what you would do here is FOIL. We would do our first, which would be 7z times 7z, or just 7z squared. And then you would do your outer, which would be plus 7z times 2 plus your inner of 7z times 2. And then lastly, your outer of 2 times 2, which is just 2 squared. Now, if we really break this down, we have our 7z squared plus there's 1, 2 of the 7z's times 2, so there is 2 times the 7z times 2. And then, of course, we have our plus at the end here, 2 squared. Now, before we get into finishing that, let's take a look at our rule here for square of a sum. If we have 7z plus 2, and that's squared, I can call 7 my a, and I can call 2 my b, and I can apply this rule where I take a squared plus 2 times a b and add it to b squared. That is my square of a sum rule. So basically, I could take my 7z and square it. I can add it to 2 times 7z times 2, and then add it to 2 squared. So instead of having to FOIL and get this down to 7z squared plus 2 times 7z times 2 plus 2 squared, I can instead use the square of a sum rule to get the same thing. Now, to finish, 7z squared is 49z squared plus 2 times 7z is 14z times 2 is 28z, and 2 squared is 2 times 2, which is just 4. So this square of a sum rule is a shortcut where we use our first term and call it a, our second term and call it b, and we can say a squared plus 2 times ab plus b squared will be my answer. Now, what about square of a difference? Well, once again, if we apply this rule, we would have our a first and then minus the b, and that's going to be squared. We can take, our rule states a squared minus 2 times ab, and then plus b squared. That's our rule for square of a difference. Well, a here is 3c, so we'll have 3c squared minus 2 times 3c times 4, and we'll add that to our b, which is 4 squared. Well, 3c squared is 9c squared minus 2 times 3c is 6c, times 4 is 24c, and 4 squared is 16. So 9c squared minus 24c plus 16 is our answer. Now, what about a word problem? Write an expression that represents the area of a square that has a side length of 3x plus 12 units. Well, remember with squares, squares are special. The area of a square can be found by just taking the side and squaring it. You think length times width, well, your length and width are the same for a square, so it's just side squared, which then ultimately is just 3x plus 12 squared. So we can follow our square of a sum rule, where we take our first term a plus b squared is really going to be a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. So basically, this will equal 3x for the a squared plus 2 times 3x times 12 plus 12 squared. Well, 3x squared is 9x squared plus 2 times 3x is 6x, and 6x times 12 is 72x, and 12 squared is 12 times 12, which is 144, and our answer will be units squared. So 9x squared plus 72x plus 144 units squared is our answer for the area of a square with a side length 3x plus 12. Our last example in our special products lesson is the product of a sum and a difference. Well, we have 9d plus 4 and then 9d minus 4. And something kind of cool happens here. And if we look at this before we apply the rule, if we have our 9d plus 4 and then multiply that by our 9d minus 4, if we look at our first, for our FOIL, that would be 9d times 9d, which is just 9d squared. And a neat thing happens with our outer and our inners here. Our outer would be plus a 9d times negative 4, and our inner would be more positive, would just be 4 times 9d. And now for our last would be plus 4 times negative 4. Now 9d squared, we'll just keep 9d squared for the sake of this example. Now in the middle, 9d times negative 4d is plus a negative 36d, and 4 times 9d is plus 36d. And what if I take a negative out here? What if I take this negative and make it minus just 4 times 4? Well, a neat thing again happens. This negative 36d cancels out with the positive 36d, and all we're left with is 9d squared minus, well, 2 4s is just 4 squared. So it's just a fancy way of explaining this rule. The middles cancel out. So, if we have a plus b times a minus b, what you can do is just take your a and square it, and then subtract your b squared. Well, your a in this question is 9, so we have 9d squared minus your b is 4 squared. 9d squared is 81d squared minus 4 squared is 16. 81d squared minus 16 is your answer, as if you were to FOIL, your minus 36d plus 36d cancels out, and you're just left with 81d squared minus 16. That is it for this lesson on special products.